Hello, my name is Jaden Gutierrez, and I will be presenting today on California Indian anti-colonial resistance with a historical examination. To start off, I want to ask what comes to mind when you hear the word resistance? Because whenever we hear the word resistance, we often think of grand revolutions or global wars. But resistance also happens quietly, in the burning of a mission, in the voice of a woman defying an empire, in the refusal to leave home, and in the act of reclaiming stolen land. Today, I want to share the story of California Indian resistance, a story that spans centuries and takes many forms, from armed rebellion to political protest. These aren't just historical facts, they're moments of agency, dignity, and cultural survival that deserve more space in how we tell American history. Who are California Indians? Well, before colonization, California wasn't just wilderness. It was home to hundreds of indigenous tribes with advanced systems of governance, trade, craftsmanship, and environmental management. Take the Kumeyaay, for example. They had structured clans called the Shimok, complex trade routes, astronomy knowledge, and a leadership system that united tribes for defense when needed. So when Spanish colonizers arrived with missions, they weren't meeting passive groups, they were encountering nations with their own ways of life. To start off with the Kumeyaay Revolt, 1775, just 6 years after the first mission was founded in California, the Kumeyaay rose up. On November 4th, 1775, they launched a coordinated revolt against Mission San Diego de Alcala. They burned it to the ground and killed a missionary, not out of savagery, but as a direct response to the loss of their autonomy, forced labor, and religious suppression. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst, it was planned across bands and different tribes, demonstrating that the Kumeyaay fully understood the threat to their culture and were willing to fight to defend it. To the left is going to be a map of the different Kumeyaay lands, which spans from Southern California and San Diego County region down to the Mexicali and then Baja California area. So it's quite a very large area of lands. And in the top, this is going to be the destruction of Mission San Diego, at least for the first time after the Kumeyaay Revolt. 10 years later, another revolt broke out, this time at Mission San Gabriel. One of its most powerful leaders was a Tongva medicine woman named Toiparina. This is going to be a drawing of Toiparina to the top left. She allied with other native people who had been forced into mission life and planned an uprising to kill the missionaries and reclaim their space. Though the revolt was suppressed and Toiparina was captured and baptized, she left behind a powerful legacy. In her trial, she publicly declared her hatred for the Spanish and defended her right to preserve her people's traditions. Today, Toiparina stands as a symbol of indigenous feminism and spiritual resistance. On the top right is going to be the Cross of San Gabriel. This is going to be after the mission was destroyed during the revolt. And moving on, we're going to discuss the Modoc War, which ran from 1872 to 1873. As we are fast forwarding almost 100 years, we find that Native resistance is entering a new chapter, now against the U.S. military. The Modoc people living along the California-Oregon border were forced onto the Klamath Reservation. Conditions were awful and tensions ran high. In 1872, under the leadership of Captain Jack, a group of Modoc left the reservation and returned to their homeland near Tule Lake. When the army tried to remove them again, they retreated to the lava beds, using the terrain to fight back in a prolonged guerrilla warfare. To the right is going to be a picture of Captain Jack, and to the left is going to be the terrain of the lava beds. As you can see, it's very rocky, and they had better knowledge of how this ground was built and how to use it to their advantage. Despite being outnumbered and underarmed, they resisted for months. Captain Jack was eventually executed and his people were exiled, but the Modoc War remains a striking example of Native resistance that rarely gets the attention it deserves, even though it cost the U.S. government dearly and showed just how far Native people were willing to go to defend their land. Up next, now let's bring it into the modern era, is going to be the era of protest, civil rights, and mass media. In 1969, a group called the Indians of All Tribes occupied Alcatraz Island. This wasn't just symbolic, they were citing the Treaty of Fort Laramie, which stated that unused federal land should be returned to Native peoples. The occupation lasted 19 months and drew national media attention to issues like poverty, cultural erasure, and broken treaties. It was a peaceful protest, but a powerful one. It helped ignite the Red Power movement and led to major policy shifts towards Native self-determination. Even though many of the protesters weren't from California tribes, their message resonated across the nation and their resistance made history. On the left is going to be on the outside of Alcatraz Island, while on the top right is going to be them in the main structure of the jailhouse in Alcatraz. This next picture is going to be a picture of them holding up a right fist, which is very similar to the symbolic picture of Black Power, which is often used by the Black Panther Party. In reflection, this research changed how I see resistance in the indigenous communities, as the erasure of native defiance from mainstream media has resulted in a narrative that makes it seem that indigenous people did not resist colonization. And I think it's important to talk about peaceful versus armed resistance, as both are very important and both matter, as each different form of resistance and protest can be used for different scenarios. It's also going to be the stereotypes versus reality of Native intelligence organization, where Natives were often painted to be seen as primitive savages, even though they were very capable of organizing um, armed resistance against the US military. And I just think it would be interesting what if every student learned this version of history? Because researching this topic really opened my eyes. I used to believe that Native people were passive victims of colonization because how the story is told in most classrooms. But that's not the truth. The truth is that Indigenous people fought back again and again with dignity, with leadership, and with pride. And I believe it's our job to remember, honor, and amplify these stories because they are not just part of Native history, they are part of American history. And I'd like to finish this off by with the land acknowledgement that we acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Lisenyo and Payakawichan people. CSUSM and its surrounding areas are still home to the six federal recognized bands of the La Jolla, Pala, Palma, Pachenko, Rincon, Saboba, Lisenyo, and Payakawichan people. And thank you.